Hello and welcome. This is Natasha Edwina. Welcome to the Oasis of Awareness, where we dive deep into systemic change through positivity, pleasure, partnership, and playfulness. I am here today with my guest, Dr. Jenn Gunsaullus. I'm very excited to introduce her. She is an author, a sexologist, a sociologist, a speaker. She does a lot of amazing things. And what I really love about her is she opens up the conversation about sexuality, mindful sex, consciousness, and in particular, female sexuality with that feminist critique. So, and also just really keeping things out in the open. So this is going to be a very unfiltered interview. I hope you have my permission, Dr. Jenn. Welcome. What would you like to add to that?
Yeah, thank you for the introduction. I'm excited to chat with you. We have so much in common. We met a couple months ago in person for the first time, and it was so fun to sit down over lunch and coffee and hash out all of these topics and all of these directions of sexuality and female sexuality and sociological learnings and spirituality and gender role socialization and all of these topics. So yeah, no, I'm excited to be here. And I mean, just a little bit more about me. I have my doctorate in sociology, so that's my educational background. And my specialty is sex and sexual health and relationships and gender role socialization. And so I do have a private practice with individuals and couples. I travel the country as a public speaker, at least I did. As of 6 weeks ago, I traveled the country as a public speaker before coronavirus shelter-in-place lockdown. And yeah, so my whole mission and purpose in life is to create paradigm shifts around healthy sexuality and happy relationships, because we're never taught how to do that well. And these topics really hit us at our core and our self-worth and, you know, and who we are in the world and how we connect with others. And so it's easy to have concerns and issues around these topics and not know what to do about them. So that's what I help people with.
Absolutely. I love that word paradigm shift. That so aligns with my work as well. I actually have that I work with paradigm shifters in my Instagram bio.
Oh, that's awesome. Oh, cool.
Yeah, so it's a whole different conversation. And yeah, my background is a marriage and family therapist. So there's that I've always been interested in relational concepts and intimacy and all of that, even though I didn't really work as a traditional marriage therapist, more so in the broader sense of relationships. Yeah. So today we're going to talk about quarantine dating or quarantine relationships. And of course, as soon as we went into shelter in place and I started seeing the different after the initial crisis, I started seeing the different relational dynamics settle and kind of figure out where it was going to fall. You're the first person I thought of. I think I texted you, or I texted you, or I saw something online and I was like, I've been waiting for you to say something about this.
I wrote a 5-part essay series on sex in San Diego, or sex and dating in San Diego during coronavirus. And it was so cute. Yeah, after I posted the first one, I don't know, 4 weeks ago or something, you're like, I was waiting for something from you. I wanted to know your thoughts on this. So yeah.
And so let me ask you a couple things. And I know things are changing moment to moment, and we're recording this now on, what day is it? Tuesday?
Yeah.
Tuesday. And we'll see.
21st of April, I think. Yeah.
So we'll see how things shift as we go. And also, I thought about this while I was in the shower this morning, you know, when the water is running and there's movement, we get a lot of our creative thoughts or our insights. I thought we should probably do some sort of medical disclaimer and just say, because we are talking about, you know, like this coronavirus lifestyle, that although both of us are PhD level academians and we work as coaches and all of this, that we're not medical doctors. And so we're not treating or diagnosing anything here in this conversation. So put that out there, because people are ultra sensitive these days to any kind of information.
Yeah.
And just wanted to throw that out there. But yeah, so one of the first things that I thought of is how does this impact those dating relationships that aren't maybe committed or exclusive yet? You know, so you're just sort of starting to date. Maybe you're polyamorous. Maybe you're a polyamorous dater, and you're dating multiple people, whether you're sexual or not sexual with them. because now it's a biological conversation, not just an ethical also an ethical conversation.
Yeah.
And it's not so much about trust and commitment and intimacy, but commitment now takes a deeper level, because it's like, am I committed enough to you to get sick with you? Or, because that can happen.
Yeah, the levels of how folks are making decisions are really interesting, because we've got factors of your personal health. And so if folks have asthma, or if they're older, or if they think they may be more at risk, then they have to make choices to limit who they're going to interact with. And then I know some folks that they might be like, okay, I think I could handle this. However, I would feel guilty if I needed medical services for something and that was taking it away from someone else. So those, societal, ethical, medical considerations for our healthcare system, as well as some folks that are the ones that are picking up groceries for elderly neighbors or for their parents, and not wanting to increase the risk of then those interactions. So what folks seem to be doing, what I know, and I have to say, I'm in my mid 40s. And so what folks in their 20s are doing, I'm not quite sure. And it was funny, I was thinking that this morning, and a couple weeks ago, I was like, I need access. There was somebody I was going to interview that was in her early 20s around all of this, and then she kind of disappeared and just popped back up. So I don't know, because the folks I talk to mostly about this, like, there's a wisdom that comes with age in general about this bigger picture social consciousness. That at 47, I don't think I would have had this the same way at 22. That like, oh, I could be a carrier of this and unwittingly spread to somebody else. And like, that would be horrible if that person got sick like that. I don't know. They say the prefrontal cortex isn't fully developed till age 25 or 26, which means understanding fully of consequences and bigger picture concepts like that. And obviously people are at all different ages. So, but in general, the folks I've been talking to, it's been a balancing of their commitments. You said it's not about trust, but it's about a different kind of trust. Like, do you trust that, when you have your kids half time and your ex-wife as your kids other part of the time, do you and you're at higher risk of infection or something, or that this could really hurt you? Do you trust that your wife washes her hands a lot, ex-wife, or who she's out dating with or whatever? So, the more people that we have in our lives, especially, you mentioned polyamorous lives and dating, the more the more potential context that you're getting. And it's really interesting. I mean, everybody makes their own decisions around how risky they are, who to trust, how, whether they're wearing face masks or not, how much they're going out, and their personal needs, their personal sexual needs, physical needs, emotional, mental, and balancing that, with loneliness, and sadness. So it's a really interesting mix of factors, and the particularly odd ones are that we don't want to overwhelm the health system and just this general social consciousness for people whose immunity isn't as strong as ours might be. And that's like a really interesting, I think it's a beautiful consideration, especially in a country that is so divided. And frankly, I had somebody said to me about 5 weeks ago, they're like, I think this is going to bring our country together. And I go, I think you're wrong. And that's the sociologist in me. I was like, oh no, this is going to make our divides even stronger. And we're seeing that happening. So
absolutely. Yeah. As a systems therapist too, that's what happens to the system in crisis. That crisis hits. So this is the crisis, and then everything wobbles, and it's just like, having a baby is a crisis. It doesn't bring the couple closer together. It's another thing that you have to work through, and it exposes all the cracks. So I feel like everything is really under the microscope right now, literally and figuratively. We get to see what's really
all
going
the
on.
issues you come in with, And then you add global crisis and stress and financial, insecurity and sadness and disappointment. I mean, the collective disappointment, just say for Americans in general, of canceled proms and graduations and weddings and people dying and not being able to be there, not being able to go to the funerals, and just the I could speak for me of my whole career just stopping pretty much, and my life and travel and speaking and everything I've hustled for years to build into place. So just like this collective disappointment, like all of those things don't, while lots of people are going to a place of compassion, which is beautiful, and people are stepping up, of course, which is what people do in times like this. Not everybody, but many people. And it's beautiful to see, but the underlying sadness, disappointment, grieving, stress, fear, instability, and losing most of our social outlets, and sports outlets and everything. I was like, that doesn't bring out the best in people.
Well, not only, sports outlets, public spaces, places in nature. I mean, there's just so many things that got cut off. And so one of the things, I have so many questions after listening to you, but one of the things that I was thinking about is that cost benefit analysis of what is it that we're doing. I understand that there's a very dangerous, deadly virus out there. And how deadly is it to be physically isolated? How deadly is it to lose your job for months and months and months, to lose your health insurance? And so related to that, I was to rewind it a little bit, again, back to the sexual health conversation. When you are when you're sexual with somebody, even if you're using condoms, things happen. You can still be exposed to any number of things, viruses, STIs. And now if you are continuing to have multiple partners, even during this quarantine, one thing that takes it a step further is, are you now not able to get the care to treat those everyday infections because medical staff is shut down, or and then also do you not have the insurance to cover that, and is that going to cause maybe for some people, STIs to go up if they aren't honoring the social distancing? And how will that change the conversation around sexual health after this, now that we're so very aware of viral transmissions or bacteria, or washing our hands, or protecting our skin spaces and our bodies? And I'm just curious. I don't have any answers.
No, I have so many places I want to go with that. So because I've been toying with, a few days ago, I was typing up different aspects. I was like, God, I want to write a blog on this, but this is so complicated. Literally giving my predictions for like the end of this year of what sex, relationships, dating, consent, vulnerability, compassion, like all of these topics in my wheelhouse. So I've been thinking about this a lot. So first of all, folks that are already good at sexual health conversations will be bringing this conversation into the mix. About the COVID-19 and concerns about that. In general, our population overall is terrible at sexual health conversations. This, I don't think, is going to change it, because part of the reason we're terrible at sexual health conversations is it's so socially awkward. We're not good at talking about sex in the first place. We're often drinking or smoking pot or something when folks are hooking up. To lower their inhibitions, to not be worried about rejection, to care less about body image, to all of this like social awkwardness, ickiness that we like feel, particularly in our chest area and our solar plexus area. That feels scary. I don't think folks are building skills in that right now. I think we're actually losing some skills in that because of social isolation, and because we're using technology even more, which is, thank God we have this technology and can do this. And because I live alone for, I'm 5.5 weeks into living alone and hardly seeing anybody. And I wasn't dating anybody coming into this. So like, I got nothing, like I am alone. And it sucks. And I actually, just talking about that made me forget where the hell I was going. What was I talking about?
You see that you got into your feelings, you got into your
Oh,
solar plexus.
there's no issue getting into my feelings. I could use a little less of that sometimes, frankly.
Yeah. Well, you were saying one of the things that I was thinking of when you were saying that as a society, we're really bad with this conversation and we need to drop the inhibitions. I think you could probably agree with me in that, because there's so much shame around sexuality, and then we can, spend another day talking about why that is, religion and patriarchy and whatever else. But there's so much shame around those sexual health conversations, so that if you talk about it, it's very difficult. But I almost feel like this with COVID, there's not as much shame because it's so widespread. So I wonder if there is yes, if you're not used to having those health conversations, you're not going to be good at it. But I wonder if it's easier to have, I wonder for people who didn't know how to have that health conversation well, but they were still trying. Now COVID is kind of like that gateway to that. Have you been exposed to anybody that has symptoms of COVID?
Yeah.
Oh, also, how about these other things? When was your last sexual experience?
I would love that.
Mm-hmm.
Having been in this field for so long, and worked around sexual shame, it's so catching the common cold from somebody, or or flu or COVID-19 versus something that comes through your genitals. That's just it is. If you think about herpes, for example, the fact is, for most people, if they contract herpes, many people don't have outbreaks. Even for folks who do have outbreaks, there's nothing outside of giving birth, and there's stuff they can do around that to protect your baby. So there's nothing actually life-threatening about herpes. Yet it is probably one of the most stigmatized STIs that we have. And because it's a social disease. And it's a social disease because it comes from our genitals, even though, it can come from your mouth also. So, but that's how it's grouped in people's heads. And our genitals carry just so much shame in our society. So I would love if folks did that. I just think it's in its own category of that's hard to access because it's so scary and uncomfortable.
On the flip side, kind of a little bit of devil's advocate, I found this article. Well, it wasn't even an article. Actually, I was interested on how common are viruses in the human body. Like, how many viruses are we carrying just without knowing it?
Yeah.
And so I went on to Wikipedia, which is the very first overview of the topic. So then you can dive deeper into the different areas just to see what's the summary, right? Anyway, Wikipedia brought up a study that was done in I want to say it was, oh gosh, now I can't remember, but I did post it on my Facebook. That said they interviewed about 100 people. So it's just a preliminary study on how many viruses they're carrying. The average person was carrying about 5.5 viruses simultaneously. Healthy person, no symptoms. So about 5.5. And the viruses they're particularly looking at were, oral and genital herpes, flu, cold, all these, and other viruses. And so and then they found 92% of the population was carrying
interesting
multiple viruses.
Yeah.
So if 92% of the population is carrying about 5.5 viruses at all times and healthy and no symptoms, what does that tell us? And again, you're talking about herpes and it being so stigmatized. I think I read statistics. I don't know if it was I think it was before that. I read it, that about 85 to 90% of the population has the herpes virus inside of their body, either oral or genital. And of course it gets mixed and it's hard to really tell which is which, really. So the stigma is interesting, right? Mm-hmm. The stigma is really interesting. And then would you not kiss somebody or be intimate with somebody because now they are carrying that virus dormant somewhere in their body? You know what I mean? Just thinking about these.
Well, and I wish we had more conversations like this, because I can remember years ago, this is back probably early 2000s. I was a grad student at University at Albany in upstate New York, where I got my PhD from. And I helped, I was an assistant in running the sexual health peer educator program on campus for undergrads. That was part of my assistantship fellowship as a grad student. And I can remember talking to this one young woman, she was probably 21. She was one of our peer educators, and she had just gotten diagnosed with, I can't remember if it was HPV or if it was herpes. But I remember we were talking and she goes, I didn't know that even if you wear a condom, you still have skin to skin contact, you know, because her boyfriend was wearing a condom, but they still had skin to skin contact because your external genitals still touch. And she goes, I didn't get, we don't talk about that enough, that you could still catch, you know, a disease that way, or an infection that way. And like that, that information is something that's not talked about that much.
Mm-hmm.
And I wish, like, because then people are just blindsided. Like, wait, I was safe. I did, or we had our conversations, or I thought they were tested for everything. And I was like, well, you have to find out what everything is, because it's not, you know. So we have this sort of, overall as a society, I think a more superficial level of conversation about these topics.
Yes.
And then because these are such stigmatized social diseases, there's so much shame. I mean, I've worked with a number of clients over the years of the shame after they get a diagnosis. I mean, I'm happy they come to me and I can work them through it, and get them back into dating and you know, a place of self-worth. So I just, you know, the conversations, the detailed conversations about COVID-19 and how it's spread and how it's not, and how long it stays in the air, and, you know, and what face masks, what they do protect us from, what they don't protect us from, and how it's better than nothing. And like all of these things, that would be amazing to have that matter of fact type of conversation without shame or stigma or the embarrassment around sexual topics attached to being able to talk about safer sex in that same way.
To know the actual, first of all, to have the data and have the science to be able to have that conversation at that level, because there's always risks, and being a human is a risk. Like everything we do, every contact, every social contact. So this is interesting. You brought up HPV. I talked to a doctor at Planned Parenthood who told me that almost everyone they test has HPV, some form of HPV, because there's about 100+ strains of it.
Yeah.
And they only will notify the patient if they have one of the 4 that tend to cause cancer. So you could test from your cervical exam, you could test positive and they won't even tell you, because it's so common that it just doesn't even make any sense to add that anxiety to the patient.
That's interesting.
And then the other interesting piece is the vaccine. So people think, people think whether it's a condom or a vaccine or whatever this barrier is, that is going to protect them, but it's not fail proof. You know, it doesn't always protect. And the vaccine only covers the 4 of the 100+, number one. So you still have to practice these conversations, you know, take care of yourself, you know, minimize risks, but also the preliminary research is starting to come out in Europe now about the first generation that has got the vaccine, and they're old enough now to see, did they get cervical cancer or not? And the rates are 50% higher for those who were vaccinated. So it failed.
Wait, this is accurate research? This is like legit good research and not.
Yes.
Like, I just need to know who funded the research and make sure.
When I post this, I will find that source and post it.
Before we're putting that out there, because I don't want my name attached to negative stuff like that. So so it was really. I hope that's not true. Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, it's really interesting to look at, again, just have a broader view. Like if we keep going up bird's eye and look at all of this stuff. So we're having this conversation about all of our risks, and then knowing that there's always going to be risks. What do we do? And so I have to also throw in there, I'm sure you heard about Fauci's, the thing in the media about him saying, they asked him about sexual contact. Did you hear this?
I don't know. How long ago was this?
It was a headline last week.
I missed that last week. Yeah.
And I didn't, the story that I read, it didn't say much. So it wasn't even, I think might have even been Fox News, but it basically asked him if they thought if he thought people could still have like date and have sex or be on Tinder. I think it had to do with Tinder. Like he's like, can you still hook up with somebody on Tinder? And he's like, well, everything's a risk. You have to make a calculated risk. And I was like, oh, wait a minute. Are we socially distancing? Like,
interesting.
Can people go a month without sex? I think it's possible.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it is. Yeah. Oh, that's it. Oh, I'll have to look that up.
So I just, like, my brain is like a little bit scrambled, kind of like, okay, how are people losing their jobs because we can't be next to somebody, but you can take a risk? It's always a risk to be on Tinder. Like, I would think that would be the first thing that would be like, no brainer.
Yeah, no,
Tinder's canceled.
I don't. Yeah, Fauci. Whatever he said. No, I don't personally agree with that. Yeah, I mean, right. If we're committing to this, right, and we're not going to jobs and we're not going to restaurants and we can't go to our beaches and, we can't go to our parks. So,
but use your discretion with a hookup.
I know. Yeah.
It's like, is that patriarchy? Like, I don't know. Like, what's going on with that? Okay. Another thing I want to ask too, related to
because there's two things I want to say related to that. So before we move on, so one is you started the conversation by asking, or this strain of the conversation, by asking about like folks who are polyamorous and maybe, think they have an STI and aren't sure what to do about that, and with the health system, and so I could only speak to Planned Parenthood specifically, and I know they've been working towards rolling out telemedicine for a while, and finally rolled it out about 3 weeks ago or something. And so I'm not sure, I heard about that as they were going into it. I'm not sure how that's going, but exactly for things like STIs and basically like, hey, here's what I got, here's what's going on, and getting the diagnosis over the phone and then being able to get medication that way and getting a prescription that way. So that is, I mean, and I think this time period is definitely gonna, we will have a whole lot more of that in the future of telemedicine. I think of folks not having to come in, as well as, in the workplaces, folks realizing, that you really can work from home a whole lot more and telecommute. So I think, changes in our, some bigger institutions like that we'll see because of that.
Which also eliminates some shame. If you can do it at home and you don't have to go into a clinic and be seen.
Actually, that's a really good point. And hopefully, folks would be more likely, because I know sometimes people they think they have symptoms, they have burning, and they're like, I don't know. Okay, maybe it'll just go away. And then a few days later, it often does, because your primary symptoms go away, but then, you end up being sterile in 15 years when you have kids, so because of the impact on your reproductive system. So that's a really good point. I think it would be easier to pick up a phone and have an anonymous, although I don't know, younger generations don't do phone calls at all. So I don't know if part of telemedicine, that they could just email, and if they'll be able to, or they have to talk live to somebody. So I don't know how that's all playing out, but I think we're going to see massive changes in the next year around that healthcare from home. And over and online. So the other thing I wanted to say, just because this was so amazing, this was about a month ago, and you might have heard this, the New York Department of Health came out with guidelines around sex and sexual health during COVID-19. And somebody actually read these out to me on a podcast interview I was doing, and I was like, that has to be fake. That has to have been faked, because I was like, no health department in the United States ever talks about sex like this. I was like, that can't be true. Totally true. They did. They had outline. It was like, I don't know who wrote it, but it was like such a good, aware, sex positive sex educator must have written it. And they literally encouraged masturbation.
I saw that.
Yeah. That's like unheard of in our country, which is insane to say that. So I was like, you know what? I think if one thing, I've been interviewed about masturbation and meditative masturbation, which is like, I have an audio file from 8 years ago, a free on my website about that for women, a guided audio file. And like all of a sudden I've gotten like 4 or 5 interviews in the past month around meditative masturbation and mindful I was like, masturbation is getting its day finally in 2020.
It only took a super virus.
I know, only a global pandemic. I was like, would have not thought this is what it took for masturbation to get its day. So yeah. So anyway, I just wanted to make sure I said those things just to answer your other questions.
Gosh, I know. And okay, so we've talked a lot about the biological stuff and how it intersects with shame and sociological and all of that. How about intimacy? So what are you noticing with your clients, your friends,
Yep.
people
Yeah.
who are maybe single and dating, or were were dating, or are
Yeah.
they dating now, even though it's not in person, just an extended
Right.
getting to know you?
So yes. So okay. So I'll start there. Speaking for me and my friends and some folks I know, who were single coming into this and didn't have anybody that we were, say, physical with or dating seriously in any way. All of us have, don't go on dates. I know a friend at the start of this, and like 4 weeks ago, I think, went on a walk with somebody, and they stayed 6 feet apart. But then even after that, she stopped doing that. So she was just doing like Zoom dates. I talked to a guy that in like the first 3 weeks or 4 weeks of all of this had already done 12 Zoom happy hour dates. And so he meets for like 45 minutes or an hour, and he actually really likes it. And this was super interesting. He was saying that there's an intimacy one-on-one with somebody. And he was saying, compared to like you go out to a restaurant or a bar and people are dressed up and they're putting their best foot forward, plus you've got the interaction with the waiter or the waitress and other people around, and you have things to look at and things to talk about. And so like the context adds to the date. And then, you have a drink, and maybe you're on your second date or drink, and you're like, oh, this person's not that great. Well, you know what? No, this is really fun. So like the whole environment adds to maybe you liking this person more than you really like them, or think you get along with them more than you do. And he found that on these, so he's having like one beer or something, and they may be drinking something also, but in this time period of just you're each in your living room and you're talking to each other, like you really need to see, can you carry a conversation? Do you have things in common? Like there's nothing else to aid in making you think you're a good fit for each other. And you also know you're not going to kiss, or you're not going to go, hook up or make out. So you don't have the physical yearning driving anything. So there can be more of an intimacy in how people are connecting now and getting real. On the flip side of it, I know I struggled like 5 weeks ago when this was all going down with a couple guys that there was some interest and some phone calls and texting and all, with their what I call putting icing on a shit cupcake. As this shit was going down in society. And I was like, oh my God. So my speaking gigs got canceled. And then I was like, okay, kids are home from school. Like, who's taking care of them? And what about single moms? And what about grandparents that are taking care of them now that are more risk? And what about restaurants that are going to close down? And what about racial disparity? And I guess my sociologist brain, just like kicked in, and I could see all of these components at once between my own disappointments and challenges, and then seeing like this globally happening, or at least, in the United States. I was like, oh my God, my heart is breaking for individuals and random strangers I don't know. And so I was running across men, and I think this was their stress response, that they were putting icing on this shit cupcake. And they're like, look on the bright side, this will have a silver lining. We'll all come together, whatever. And I'm like, oh, so, that's horrible. It's trivializing what I'm going through, and it's complete lack of compassion, because to genuinely feel compassion for someone else, we need to be able to sit with their suffering and not sugarcoat it or deny it or tell them it's all going to be okay. We need to be able to sit with that. And that's emotional intelligence, and that takes courage, and that's vulnerability. And what I was finding is that the men that I was talking to did not seem to have that capacity, and it was further adding stress to me. So I just cut them out. I was like, no. And so, on the flip side, you really see what people are made of in how they're responding to this. Do they care about social consciousness? How aware are they? What are their political beliefs? What are their philosophical beliefs? How do they handle stress? Are they able to be empathetic? Are they able to sit with the complexity of all of this and still take care of themselves and know how to take care of others? And I have been a little disappointed.
Yeah,
say.
I would love to tease that out even a little bit further. That's a great perspective. And I want to tease it out a little bit further of just because I've been noticing the pulse, the emotional pulse of society lately too, just from being online and watching and comments and whatever else and posts. And it's okay if he's not dropping into his compassion, or he's not dropping into his feelings, because as you know, like, men are socialized to be kind of tough and be the fixers and to save or whatever else. That's his process, right? But if you're saying that I'm not there with you and he's not able to hold space for you having a different process, that's a problem. But also, it doesn't mean, like, for those of us who aren't feeling bad, or we're not feeling depressed, or, you know, it just doesn't, it's not hitting us the same way, that it's not that you're tone deaf or emotionally unintelligent to not feel what the other one's feeling. But also, it is important that, again, you hold space or have compassion. And when you try to take away that other person's experience on either side, you know, I think that's the piece that I would like to add to that conversation, because I think I've seen shaming on both sides, like shaming for people being very like, okay, let's start a business or whatever, and then shaming on people, you know, that are like, you know, why are you still in your pajamas, you know, get up or whatever. So it's just like everything, like, why can't we open, you know, just the sexual health conversation, why can't we open to a full range of experiences? Why can't we just open, like, let everybody have their frickin' way of going through things, or their preferences, or their emotions, their feelings, their sexual feelings, their preferences, you know, all of it.
Right.
And how do we hold space for all of that? And then the other piece that I wanted to comment on is the dating. Well, two things. a funny story that I'd like to share as far as, like, the environment. I hadn't thought about that part, like how the environment interacts with the date, and how you might have, like, a really fun time, and maybe that increases your attraction to somebody who doesn't really have all the criteria, or, you know, what you need. And I was talking to a therapist friend, and she's also a coach, and she was talking about her dating journeys, you know, as a single woman in her 40s as well. And she went out with this man, and they had a great time and whatever else. And then she said the check came, and it was his suggestion to go to this very expensive, fairly expensive restaurant. And then the check came, and he just did not, like, want to touch it. And then like, she just let it sit there. And then after a while, he was like, well, do you want to split the check? And she kind of just, like, paused, and she said, I was thinking in my head, not if you want my pussy wet later. Like, and then, so just those little things that, you know, that are off the table now, that we're only meeting in Zoom or whatever, they do enhance attraction, right?
Right.
That for certain people, depending on.
Depending on what you're looking for. Yeah, no, that's actually a really interesting thing. Well, yeah, and someone else, like, if you like feeling taken care of, and if somebody pays for you and you feel like it's a treat and all, like, that's all an aphrodisiac potentially for you, depending on what you're looking for. So
that romance part. And then the other piece about the online chatting, or the texting, or the phone calls, or whatever, it's that piece to kind of or that process to kind of move really slowly, like to have all of that other stimuli gone, just like life in general, all those distractions we had gone off the table. And now getting to see, like, the slowest evolution of a spark, maybe, or a little thing here or a little thing there that sort of grows, like a slow burning fire, maybe, rather than that instant attraction that might come from a nice restaurant and he smells good, or this is going on, or there is some touch that's kind of like magnetic or whatever. That's all, again, off the table. So how does that translate then to, let's say, a sexual experience? Because you and I are both researchers in the area of mindful sex, and the slow I don't even want to use the word foreplay, because it is foreplay, but it's, you know, it's much more than it is the sexual experience, especially for women. And in the moment to moment, the slow warming up process, right? It almost mirrors this female sexuality model in a way. I don't know, what do you think about that?
It's interesting, I think, because it's one of the strengths of meeting somebody online and just messaging with them is also one of its biggest weaknesses. It creates intimacy, but that can be false intimacy sometimes. And then particularly we're going through a global pandemic and, you know, and so it could be easier to, I don't necessarily have the right words to this, but to cling to somebody if you feel like you have a connection and you're going through this hard thing together, and then you start sending sexy messages and, you know, and sexting and stuff like that. So I feel like if you're using like any sort of video conferencing and really seeing the person's face and having very real conversations like this, yeah, I think it's prolonging this sort of courtship time period. I think that could be incredibly beneficial for people. I think a lot of people, then they do it and they do it for a few weeks and then you're like, yeah, no, okay, I'm done with this person. But had they been sexual with them and then had all that chemistry, then that would sort of cloud them of whether this person's a good fit for them or not. Yeah. What I'm not sure is I don't know how much people then are just, you know, relying on texting and building that intimacy and then sexting and stuff like that. But then that does not necessarily translate to once you're actually in person. So, I don't know. I think it's how they're using technology and how they're showing up to technology. And I think that depends on, you know, what personality you come in with, frankly, probably what generation you are, and what you're looking for. So, and my guess is probably particularly with younger generations, if they're doing that and then things are getting hot and steamy over texting, probably one of them will be like, let's get together. We could probably still get together. We'll be fine. I have a feeling younger generations in particular, I would think must be doing that. If they were used to more hookups and casual sex, I'm guessing there's a lot of, you know, breaking of the rules, so to speak there.
Well, ironically, this is not a research study by any means, but just talking to my clients, my contacts in my friend circle, I've noticed the theme is Gen X men are the ones that are breaking the social distancing the most. That's what I've noticed, because when we first, you know, the shelter in place first one, and they're like, oh yeah, I was meeting with my friends or my family, and this one's like, oh yeah, I had a date yesterday, and I was like, wait a minute, why are we all at home losing our income if people are still like out there dating or getting together in their small, you know, small little groups or whatever. But they didn't, none of them seemed to be aware that was not in the parameters, and so I was a little bit upset about it, to be honest, at first. Yeah. And then I was talking to another friend, and she's like, "Did you really think people would honor this rule or whatever?" And I was like, "I thought my friends would." Like, I thought, right? You know, I knew that there was going to be a lot of other people, and I also, just to kind of position myself, I am of the belief, because I study mind-body medicine. My PhD is in mind-body medicine with a specialization in integrative mental health, but mind-body medicine is also called psychoneuroimmunology. So it's about how stress, how nutrition, how mindfulness, meditation, spirituality, all these things impact our immune system and therefore chronic health, right? So I have a different perspective on all of the things that actually improve immunity. And that's why I say when we talk about reopening the beaches and all this, it has to be a cost risk benefit, and to realize that there's a lot of things, good things that we're being cut off from that could actually boost the immune system towards many other viruses and things that are out there too. So we'd have to, that has to be a part of the conversation. But yeah, so, you know, just being interested in that part, and now I forgot where I was going. I just did the same. We're equal, 1-to-1. I know.
I spent too much time alone. I know.
That had to do with getting together. Oh, I know what it was. Okay, so although they are going about out and about, am I concerned necessarily about their health? Not as much. I'm more so concerned about why are you getting to do it when other people are home? And you know, people lost their job. Like, this is serious. And if the whole nation is under lockdown, then we ought to we ought to follow it and just see if it works.
I know.
Like otherwise it's not gonna, like it's already in place. So we might as well just see if it works. It's kind of like they're tainting the research. You know what I mean?
Right. No, I mean, and this is what I'm saying, that like this, for me and others I've talked to in terms of dating and meeting other people during this time period, or even friends and stuff, like it's a litmus test of people's character. And a litmus test, I say, for me, in terms of, are these people that are like-minded with me, and philosophically, and that our values are aligned, and this like that there's places that you really make pretty weighty individual sacrifices for a larger good, which is interesting, because that's not a foundation that our country is built on necessarily, that's
not
like
a collectivist culture.
Right. Yeah. Latino cultures and Asian cultures are more, community, family oriented, and we are rugged individualists. Like that's what, Americans claim to fame. And there's a lot of positive aspects to that. But yeah, so it's interesting of where and how people make decisions for themselves and weigh the bigger picture. So no, I mean, and I think it falls down. It does seem in some ways to fall along political lines that we've already had a divide around. But that's because that's where people are getting their news sources from. So, and we're getting
started
fed,
before that.
Yeah, we're getting fed very different versions of the truth with a small t.
And then, yes, truth with a small t. And that's the problem, because when you you and I know as researchers, when you actually look at the published research, you actually look at the data, it's not, people don't even believe it. They don't even trust it, because they're like, well, what political party person did this come from? And it's like, I feel like if you're a true scientist or you're a true researcher, on some level, you're like, politics really doesn't matter. I mean, you might align, your values might align to one party or the other, but research is research, data is data. Like, you can't.
It's the issue that it comes down to is where the bias shows up in research is in the research questions you ask in the first place. And like what seems worthy of studying and what isn't worthy of studying, how you frame your hypotheses. And then there can be, because I know this from, feminist research study classes from the 90s, that, how that's, ways that bias are influenced into science. Now, in general, though, hopefully you've got, if you're getting your work published, you have people, you've got, blind reviewers that are looking through it and pointing out biases and holding everybody to a higher standard. So, the system has its checks and balances in that way. So, but there definitely is still bias in research, but in general, less so than most everything else. Right? So, yeah.
Yeah, really interesting. And then now I think just in the culture that we're in, you have to really look at who's funding the research too. That maybe had less to do with the socio-culture, what am I trying to say? Like the feminist critique, but now, there's so much big corporations that are funding research. And then is that, are they pushing it through? And in my PhD program, one of the things that they first educated us on, and maybe it's because it's in an area that is a progressive kind of new paradigm of health. That it's a very rigorous program, because they know that we're going to be labeled as quacks and all of that. So it's been very difficult to get through. This is why I'm not done yet. I'm still in the dissertation stage. It was supposed to be a 3.5-year program. I'm going on year 7. Here pretty soon. But being so rigorous, but they told us there's the file drawer effect. And it's like, if the funding body did not like your results, the research paper goes into the file drawer and it doesn't get published. And so there's other, places, powers that be. And it's, and I guess, again, it points back to that conversation that we've been having from the very beginning when we got on the phone, is how big of a broad of a perspective do you want to look at all of these things? And what does your intuition tell you? What does your gut tell you? What is your personal level of risk, knowing what you know? And what is it that is your most pressing need at this time? So do you need, and then for people like you who said that you're alone, I'm alone too. I'm here, I'm single, I'm here in my house. I think I've left the house probably a total of 3 or 4 times. And that was for groceries
Yeah.
and necessities, you know.
Yeah.
We did break away and go to the beach, walk to the beach. Thank goodness I live close enough. It was a 4-mile walk though, round trip. It was a lot.
Oh,
but
wow.
It's still my neighborhood, but I really just needed to get back to the beach.
Oh, that makes a big
but all the parking
yeah.
is closed down or whatever. But anyway, I have children that are here half of the time. I have 50-50 custody. So I get snuggles, I get physical touch, I get, you know, that level of at least skin to skin contact, even though it's different than a romantic connection.
Yeah.
It's still physical touch. And even having that, I've been craving, you know, I've always had a dog until the last couple of years I have not. And I'm like, oh man, I really wish I had a dog right now just to snuggle at my feet or whatever else. And so you start to realize these needs that you have. And I'm an introvert, and I'm not somebody who really needs a lot of social interaction. And I don't think that I'm the type of person, I'm probably need more emotional and intellectual connection probably than physical. I'm thinking, I don't know, not to say that physical isn't important to me, but those others are necessities too. And so I'm just, you know, but for people who are very physical, they're oriented to be very affectionate. What is it? The love language is physical touch, right?
Yeah.
I can have compassion for them if they do break those social distancing rules, guidelines, whatever you want to call them, because I can imagine in their orientation, like that is such a need for them. And that would be like me not being able to have maybe intellectual or emotional intimacy. And, you know, I can see, I can try to see what that must be like.
I mean, and I think what I hope people are always doing, and that it gets heightened in a time period like this, is just being reflective on the choices and decisions you make, and really don't be reactive, but make choices and be like, okay, this is what I value, this is what I miss, this is what feeds me and nourishes me, this is where I'm struggling, and not you know, just on a whim making choices. In general, we, you know, our relationships are healthier and the happiest when we learn to be mindful about our choices and what's driving us, what's happening physically for us, what's happening emotionally, what's happening mentally, what our social needs are and aren't, where our, you know, our self-esteem and our self-worth is in all of this, and being really reflective and of your values for yourself and who you want to be in this world and what it means to you to be a good person. And so, you know, I know some folks are definitely using this time to reflect on, you know, what does really matter to me, and have I been prioritizing what matters or not, and how can I make changes moving forward. It's just that this time period was thrust upon us, and that because there's so much stress and uncertainty around it. Folks aren't, you know, we're not really at our best to be practicing higher level personal growth things right now. But I mean, for folks that are physical touch in their love languages and really crave that and need that, I hope they're just, you know, learning about themselves and being reflective of all the different components and not just being reactive. So, I mean, and that's always my hope for people, that they're learning skills in that, because they will be happier in the long run in life and in all of their interactions. So,
yeah, absolutely. Emotional intelligence skills. And it's interesting that you bring that up, because I'm actually running a group, which is called a Mind Body Skills Group. And I've been wanting to get these online for 5 years. Well, guess what? I just had the opportunity to go for it, because I really felt like I am not as distressed as a lot of people right now. I've been through a lot of personal turmoil and transformation in my lifetime. So whenever something comes like this, I'm just like, oh, here we go again. You know, it's I know that the skills to move through. So I've jumped into caretaker mode, into being of service. And so I'm running these Mind Body Skills groups, which actually teaches the skills for people to be more mindful, to be more emotionally intelligent, to know how to get through not only this, but whatever comes in the future. And also, like you, I do some speaking engagements, and I work at a integrative wellness center called Vera Via. It's in the Park Hyatt, and that has shut down. So a lot of my and I do hypnosis there and those sorts of things. So a lot of my referrals for my online work, which I've been doing for 5 years, come through there or other speaking engagements. So that was a big like, whoo, that just stopped. But I was already set up to work online. So now I'm just having to hustle and do more of the speaking online, I guess, but then it gives me an opportunity to do these YouTube interviews, which I started my YouTube channel just before this happened, and then got too busy, right, with client sessions. So here I am. All of that went away, and here I am. So this is great. So the just to wrap things up, what I wanted to use that metaphor. I know that when the world opens back up again, we're just going to say, I don't know how else to refer it to that than that, but I am thinking about what am I going to take with me that I've learned from this period, and what is going to go away now, now with this perspective. And of course, we don't know what the world's going to look like. And we might be dealing with this COVID risk for the next 2 years. They're saying it could be that long. I know that I'm going to come out of this with faster internet, better devices, better technology, better tech skills. I'm going to be set up pretty much for anything. Now, as far as relationships, dating, sexuality, whatever else, what is the best possible scenario for folks to come out of this, set up?
Yeah. I mean, first of all, for couples that already were together and living together and maybe were married or long-term relationship or have kids at home or whatever, many of them are struggling in that if they had issues coming into this, sexual intimacy or communication or different parenting styles, all of those have gotten, much bigger with what's going on because of the stress and not having any outlets and being, stuck at home together. So I mean, this is an amazing time period, and not in a way of like beating yourself up, but knowing yourself. We get to see how we respond in stress. And stress at a level that many of us have never experienced before, at least at this global level. I talk to my parents that are in their mid to late 70s, and they're like, we have never seen anything like this and never thought we would. So this is unprecedented pretty much for everybody that's alive right now. And I mean, some folks alive have, experienced some horrible things around the world, but just sort of in this, that we're all in this together type of thing. So, if I was to give advice for folks, just reflect in a really kind way on where are your strengths and weaknesses around this. How do you respond to stress? What does nourish you and take care of you, and actually makes you feel good or proud or productive or connected, and look forward to, I mean, our society is going to be changed forever in some ways, but at some point in the not too distant future, a lot of things are going to be back to a semblance of normal, at least. What can you put into place to really start prioritizing what matters and what feeds you in life? And that's what we get to reflect on now. It's easier than others. I mean, there's some people that are working their asses off at jobs and are exhausted and have no time for personal reaction or feeling lonely or anything like that. We have people at extremes around this. And we have people that, when we do, like you said, quote unquote, come out of this, who are going to be in, financial ruins or, just terrified about their future. And so they will, definitely be in crisis mode, and that's what they need to address. It's just knowing you've got support, there's resources out there, there's organizations, there's people to reach out to, and you're not in this alone. I mean, and that's one of the biggest things. None of us are in this alone, depending on regardless of what our individual struggles are within it. So, but yeah, the bigger picture of really reflecting on what matters. And frankly, what generally matters is your physical, mental, emotional health for you, and then your social connections and meaningful connections with other people. I mean, fundamentally, that's about what it breaks down to in terms of what makes us happiest and thrive in life, and what makes us, on our deathbed, not have regrets of how we spent our time. So, yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you. So it's like, I think about it as not minimizing the trauma, but also coming out of this with some post-traumatic growth and really focusing in on those pieces.
Yeah.
Resilience.
Yeah, not at all minimizing what you're going through and the very
Mm-hmm.
real loss, struggle, grieving, disappointment, fears. And at the same time, and you can hold those at the same time. You could be in that space and be like, okay, what's one thing I can do that really makes me feel good today, but that's actually healthy for me, versus
Mm-hmm.
like, drinking a bottle of wine, it'll make you feel good for a little bit.
And on some days, maybe that is the healthiest behavior. Who knows?
Right. And there may be worse behaviors. It's true.
Right?
But yeah. And then again, there's no, it's a balance, right? There's no shaming or blaming with that, but recognizing there's, and I've instructed folks to do this, make a whole list of physical, mental, emotional, social, spiritual, write those 5 categories and write things within it that are healthy for you and self-nurturing and nourishing and make you feel good, and that are about you taking care of you. Even if it's only 5 minutes a day that you focus on something from one of those lists. And that type of awareness of self and taking care of self and self-soothing will serve you for a lifetime of, the other inevitable ups and downs and disappointments and struggles that will come with in life moving forward.
Okay. And also a question that I'd like to ask my guests at the end, I'm noticing a pattern with myself, is what personally would you like to see in the world after this? And where do you see yourself fitting into that vision? I know it's a big question.
It is. I mean, it's a continuation of what I'm doing, because all my work is all about meaningful connections with others, authenticity, vulnerability, owning and sitting with shit, and choosing how we want to respond in a way that's good for us and good for others, and not just reacting. So all of the stuff I work on is just heightened right now for individuals and couples and society overall. So I want to continue to help people be able to access their vulnerability and build emotional resilience that way, so that they are, happier and healthier, and that their relationships and sex lives are happier and healthier. So, yeah.
Amazing. Amazing. Thank you so much for being here. Where can people find you? What do you have up next? I know you have something going on tomorrow where people can call and ask any kind of sexual questions.
I'm doing a free AMA, Ask Me Anything, on sex, relationship, intimacy, dating. Folks have already been sending questions in, which is great. So I'm doing that over Zoom. I do have some workshops that I'm putting in place, a couples communication workshop, particularly around difficult conversations or in difficult times. That should be coming up actually probably in the next week or two. All of that stuff is on my website, on the calendar and on blogs there. My main hub of everything and all my online presence and videos and podcast is Dr. Jenn's Den, so drjennsden.com.
I'll have that in the caption too. Yeah, when I post this. Yeah.
So yeah.
Wow. Well, thank you so much. Such a fascinating conversation. I know we covered.
I know there's like so many other directions. I was like, okay, let that one go. We'll move on.
We could go. Yeah, we could have probably 5 more spinoffs from here for sure to go in deeper. But it was such a fun conversation, and I would love to do it again and explore some other areas.
Yep. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me on, Natasha. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Okay, so you can find Dr. Jenn's website. It'll be in the caption when I post this video, so you can find that below. My website is natashaedwina.com. Also, you can find me bedtime meditations every Tuesday and Friday. So that is tonight, but this won't be posted till later. Tuesday and Friday, 9 p.m. Central, 9 p.m. Pacific. We are in San Diego, California, 9 p.m. Pacific, Tuesday, Friday on Instagram Live, and also simultaneously on Facebook Live. So if anybody is needing to work on that self-awareness and that moving through stress. All right. Thank you so much, Jenn, and we will be talking again soon.
My pleasure. Thanks.
Bye.